As Russia's war drags out in Ukraine to its west, it's causing ripple effects in Central Asia to its south. The war has made Kazakhstan, which is Russia's largest ally in the region, increasingly nervous, and it has opened a door for closer cooperation with the West. Here's why. First, let's take a closer look at the map. Kazakhstan borders the Caspian Sea, but since it doesn't have access to an ocean, it's considered the largest landlocked country in the world. In the neighborhood are countries like Russia, China, Turkey, and Iran. Over here is Western Europe. That puts Kazakhstan at the heart of critical trade routes, but it's also made its economy heavily dependent on its powerful neighbors. The largest among them is Russia. The former Soviet sister states share this border, which is nearly 5,000 miles long. That is the second largest frontier in the world after the US-Canada border. And similar to Ukraine, Kazakhstan has a large ethnic Russian population, about 22%, and many of them live along this northern border. For years, Russian nationalists have claimed that some of this land should belong to Russia, similar to how they perceive parts of Ukraine. That sentiment has even been echoed by President Vladimir Putin, who said this about Kazakhstan's former leader in 2014.
Он же создал государство на территории, на которой государства не было никогда. У казахов не было государственности никогда. Он ее создал.
That sounds a lot like what Putin has been saying about Ukraine. And while that kind of rhetoric was brushed off in the past, the invasion of Ukraine has been a wake-up call. To get a better sense of how the country is responding, I called my colleague Evan Gershkovich, who's been reporting from the region.
They are worried, extremely worried about what I think everybody has seen as an increasingly erratic government in Moscow.
He says the country's oil industry is a good example. Kazakhstan is among the world's top oil producers. And take a look at its GDP growth. You can see that it tends to rise and fall along with global oil prices. The economy is heavily reliant on oil sales. It has benefited from soaring oil prices fueled by the war in Ukraine. And its oil is seen as increasingly important to Europe, which has begun to wean itself off of Russian fossil fuels. But take a look at this. Kazakhstan relies on this Caspian pipeline that runs through Russia to transport 80% of its oil. That reliance is a key vulnerability, according to researchers I talked to at Fitch Ratings. Russia has ordered the pipeline closed twice in recent months. The second time came after Kazakhstan's president Kassym-Jomart shared a stage with Putin and said that Kazakhstan would not recognize the breakaway republics of Luhansk and Donetsk in Ukraine.
Мы не признаем ни Тайвань, ни Косово, ни Южную Осетию, ни Абхазию. Этот принцип будет применен и в отношении квазигосударственных территорий, коими, на наш взгляд, являются Луганск и Донецк.
Russia blamed alleged environmental violations for the shutdown, not those comments. But it rattled officials, and Tokayev ordered oil companies to explore other ways to export the country's oil.
It's clear that Kazakhstan is freaked out by this. Russia is still trying to show who's in charge.
Okay, so oil is a big deal, but trade is another way that Kazakhstan has been impacted by the war. It has promised to enforce Western sanctions against Russia, a stance that has anchored some in Moscow, but could help Kazakhstan become a critical trade hub. Its ports on the Caspian Sea have seen a surge in container shipments compared to last year, and the war has drawn more attention to this so-called middle corridor.
In the current war situation, it's the one main way to get goods from China to Europe that's not by sea, and so Kazakhstan is trying to take advantage of that.
The war in Ukraine has also changed how Kazakhstan is thinking about its security. In January, when violent anti-government protests broke out in Kazakhstan, Tokayev called in Russian troops to help restore order. But now that Russia has invaded a former Soviet state and neighbor, officials are rethinking their strategy. Not only has the country boosted its defense spending, it has agreed to strengthen military cooperation with China, according to China's Ministry of Defense. And it also struck a deal with Turkey, a NATO member, to jointly produce attack drones. Kazakhstan has also had visitors from the US, including a top US commander.
Since the invasion, US diplomats have gone to Central Asia multiple times. So what we're seeing is not necessarily this massive geopolitical realignment, but sort of Kazakhstan and the rest of Central Asia hedging its bets and the US seeing an opportunity.
One Central Asia researcher told the Journal that the Kremlin isn't troubled just yet. But if the government in Kazakhstan turns hostile, it would be seen as an even greater threat to Russia than Ukraine, since the countries share such a long border. Kazakhstan's economy isn't the only one reliant on Russia. Check out this video to learn more about how Europe could be impacted by a natural gas war with Moscow. I'll see you next time.